Okay, so before we get started, so you're mentioning to the person next to you why we believe in God. So you're mentioning designer, you're mentioning the cause and effect, and the fitrah. Okay, so you mentioned these three things. Okay, so go on, everyone start now. Okay?
Okay.
And without using your notes, yeah? Without using your notes.
I don't need notes. So
Okay, so everyone can stop. Okay, who managed to go through all the questions or answer all the questions? Okay. Okay, some of you guys. Okay, so the first thing is when you, I can hear myself from the wall. No, I can't. Okay, so the first thing is when you answer these questions, so obviously you're going to be doing it in a real life situation. So you don't, when you're saying the answers to it, it shouldn't sound like you're reading off a list or a script. So let's say someone asks you, why do you believe in God? Then you say, number one, designer. And then you mention the paragraph underneath it. And they say number two. Yeah, so it shouldn't sound like you're reading off a list. So it should be a natural conversation that should flow. So for example, someone asked me, why do you believe in God? So I'd say something like, well, there's many reasons why we believe in God. So one example is we understand as humans that whenever we see something with a design, we always conclude they must have a designer. For example, if someone sees a watch in a desert, we'll conclude automatically, even if we can't see anyone around us, that someone must have designed it because it has a design. Likewise, so what we do, another thing that students, what they don't do, is just say the example and say we move on. Whereas the other person will be like, why are you telling me about a watch? What's that got to do with anything? So after the example, you link it back to your original point. So you say, likewise, this universe also has a design. So that's why we conclude that since this universe has a design, it must have a designer. Who answered the questions like this?
this man.
Okay, mashallah, good. Yeah. So first you mention your point. Everything that has a design must have a designer. You mention an example, and if you feel necessary, mention more examples. And then you say, likewise, you link it back to your original point. Since this universe has a design, it must have a designer. And then you say, okay, there's more reasons that we believe in God. For example, we know that everything that happens in this world has a cause. Nothing in this world happens without a cause. So I've mentioned my point. Yeah, everyone got that? I've mentioned my point. Now I say an example so the person understands the point I'm trying to make. And we shouldn't use I gave an example with a pen dropping or pencil dropping. That's not such a good example. So that's just, I briefly mentioned it, but there's so many other examples that you can use. What's another example for cause and effect that we can say that, that we see around us that happens every single day of cause and effect? Yes, Idris?
So maybe a car crash happened. So probably somebody was driving and then probably they were not focusing and then and the effect was them crashing.
That's true, but that's true. But what I want is I want more of a example to do with nature that happens all the time. Those sort of examples. Yes, Alif?
So let's say so a banana, yeah, a banana fell, but a banana just doesn't it doesn't fall by itself, innit?
You just replace the pen with a banana. It's the same example.
I'm just saying that a banana falls
You just replace the pen example and just say the banana instead, Alif. Okay, go on, Aryan. Okay, let Aryan have a go first.
So imagine like a trampoline from someone's garden goes flying up. It's not just going to do that automatically. It's because of the wind. The wind caused that trampoline to go flying.
Okay.
Why do you?
Okay, fair enough. Okay, and the easy example that I would say is, okay, so let's say you look at the window and it's sunny outside. Yeah, is it possible that it's sunny but there's no cause behind, there's no sun, the sun's not out? Yeah, so whenever you see that it's very sunny and hot outside, what will you conclude automatically?
The sun is up.
Yeah, the sun is up, because this is how cause and effect was, isn't it? So you never get a situation and there's no cause to it. So let's say you look outside and the whole ground, everything is wet. Yeah. So the effect, okay, so now you see that the ground is wet. What are you automatically going to conclude? It was raining before. Okay, so this is what we call cause and effect. So everything that happens in this world happens through cause and effect. Yeah. So nothing that just pops out of nowhere. Will you ever get that the entire ground, everything is wet and it hasn't rained? Will you ever get that?
No.
Everyone? No, you wouldn't, because this world is a principle that, how this world works is through cause and effect. So likewise, when this universe came into existence, did it just come out of nowhere without a cause? No, that's highly improbable. So it must have had a cause. And what was that cause? We say it was Allah. Does that make sense, everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So first you mention your point, you explain that everything happens in this world with a cause, and then you say an example, and then you link it back to your original point. Likewise, this universe, when it came to existence, must have had a cause. Everyone got that? Okay. So let's continue now to let's continue now to the next part. Let me just okay, so here in part 3, we're learning about why is Islam the true religion. So far we've discussed what Islam is, what it means to be a Muslim, how you become a Muslim. Then we learned about why does it logically make sense to believe in a God. So we've learned why it makes sense to believe in a God and to believe in one God. And we've learned that the Islam's explanation of God makes perfect sense. Okay, but the question is, okay, why is Islam the true religion? Why can't it be Christianity or Judaism? Or why didn't you follow a religion in the first place? Why can't you just believe in God and worship him in your own way? Isn't that a question that needs answering?
Yes.
Yeah. Why do I need to follow a religion? Can't I just, be good in my own way and then go to heaven? Yeah. So why is Islam the true religion? And why do we need to follow Islam, basically? Okay, so this is what we're going to learn. So what I want you to do before we actually get started is I want to discuss with the person next to you. So going to your groups again or your pairs and discuss, say all the reasons that you can think of why you think Islam is a true religion. Okay, it doesn't have to be scientific reason, doesn't have to be, could be anything. Yeah. So why you at this stage, however old you are, you believe that Islam is a true religion. If you believe it's a true religion, who believes it's a true religion? Put your hands up. Okay, so all of you guys. Okay, so I want you to explain why you think that to the person next to you. Okay, so I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to ask for feedback, see what you guys said. Okay, so go on. What do you guys have to say? Why do you believe that Islam is a true religion? Go on. Yep.
I believe Islam is a true religion because of the evidence that comes along with it. It's like in the Quran and in the Hadith and stuff. The Prophet Muhammad tells us like the major signs of the last day, and most of the minor signs of this, they've all happened. So like the Quran predicts a lot of stuff that happens throughout time, and yeah.
Okay, good. I'm sorry there. Okay, good. So predictions that the Prophet mentioned 1,400 years ago, they're coming true. What else? What do you guys say? Yep.
About the miracles that Allah gave to the prophets.
Okay, so through the miracles of the Prophet. Anything else? Yep.
Well, all the other religions have at least some flaws, whereas Islam pretty much has no flaws at all.
Okay, so with understanding that Islam's teachings are perfect. Yeah.
You could say that all the Bible and the Torah or whatever, been corrupted, they're not the same, but the Quran has remained preserved since it was first conceived.
Okay, good. So the preservation of the Quran. So Allah promises that He will preserve the Quran, and the Quran has never changed, even though 1,400 years has passed. Good. Any other reasons? Okay, so what we'll do before we start. Can the front room just lower the volume because I can hear myself and it's very distracting. Yeah, and just make sure the door's shut and the volume's lowered. Okay, so let's start. So I'm gonna if you can just hand out the papers, so both the rooms. So the handouts. If you guys take one and just pass it around. Okay, the first thing that you do when you get your papers is you put your names on it. So a lot of students, they don't write their names on it, then they leave it behind, then you have no idea whose it is. Yeah, so the first thing that you do is once you, and everyone should be writing in pen. Everyone should be writing in pen. And if there's an extras, you can put them here. Do you have one?
Yeah, I know.
Riz?
I saw.
Okay, so everyone's name should be on them. Okay, so let's start. Okay, so there's two sections to this. So it'll probably be today and tomorrow. So number one, we'll learn how the Quran is the proof that Islam is a true religion. So many of these things, mashallah, you guys will already know. Many of these things will be new as well. But after this, you should have enough confidence to explain to another person why you believe the Quran is actually from Allah. And part two is we'll learn through the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So what do we have? What do we know from the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam that proves to us that he was in reality the messenger of Allah? Okay, so once we understand that the Quran is from Allah and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is in reality a messenger of Allah, then obviously we have to accept what they say, and we have to follow them, and we have to accept them, and we have to believe in them. So number one is through the Quran, and number two through the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, so we've already answered that. We've already had this discussion. Why do you believe Islam is one true religion of God? So let's move forward. Okay, so the first thing is the foundation of Islam are two. So Islam, whatever we know about Islam comes from these two things. The foundation, these are the two sources of Islam. Number one, so write them down. Number one, the Quran. And number two, the messenger, meaning the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this is where we get our religion from. So that's why if I say to you, as Muslims, we're supposed to pray 7 times a day, would you accept what I said and believe me?
No.
Why not?
Because Allah told us.
Yeah, he's telling, because in the Quran and from the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you've been taught something else. So when someone tells you that contradicts what's in the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, you will reject that, isn't it? Yeah. So a human being, another human being, is not a source of law or a source of the Sharia or source of Islam. Likewise, our parents aren't sources of Islam. So if our parents say something which is different to what's in the Quran or the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which one do we take, our parents or the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad? The Quran and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Yeah. So the source of Islam is these two things. It's very important that we understand this. Okay, so let's move forward. So how do we know that the Quran is in reality from Allah? Okay, so number one, so who mentioned this? That the Quran has never been changed? Okay, so in the Quran, Allah has mentioned that indeed we revealed this Quran and indeed we will protect it, preserve it. So it's a promise of Allah. Allah has promised that, so you can write this down, Allah has promised that the Quran will never be changed. So Allah has promised the Quran will never be changed. And 1,400 years has passed, not a single word has changed from the Quran. So Allah has promised the Quran will never be changed. Whereas if parts of the book were missing or things had changed or weren't sure if it was exactly how this is how the Prophet Muhammad recited or not, then that would indicate as a proof that Allah's promise was wrong. So hence the Quran wouldn't actually be from Allah, because how can Allah get it wrong? Yeah, so this promise was not given for the Bible, the Torah, or the previous scriptures. That's why we believe as Muslims that there were alterations. That's why there's so many different versions and things have changed within them. Okay, but now the question is, so I'm not going to go into it in too much detail. So when we do a more of an advanced course, then we'll go into a lot more detail in these things. But how do we know that the Quran was never changed? So who can tell me? How do we know that the Quran was never changed? Yep.
Because for example, if you can tell, it tells about things from like 1,000 years which we don't know about.
The question is, once I want to stop you there, the question is, the Quran that we're reading today, how do we know that's the same Quran that was there at the time of the Prophet Muhammad? How do you know it's not just been changed now, or someone added stuff to it or took stuff out of it? That's the question.
I'm not really sure.
Okay, Jacob.
It's because in Islam you can't he promised he wouldn't change it, and he kept that promise.
That's true, but the question is, how has he kept that promise? So how has it not been changed? What was done so that it can't be changed? Yes, Umar?
Oh, well, because Hafiz means protector, and they're sort of like protecting the Quran because it's like sort of being passed down and like written again and again, but the Hafiz already know that it's not been changed like at all.
Okay, good. So in every generation, from the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, we had memorizers of the Quran. Yeah, so just make a note of this, memorizers in every generation. Yeah, so memorizers in every generation. We're still in point number 1, yeah, bro? So, yeah, so memorizers in every generation. So this is what was relied upon in terms of preservation of the Quran. So while the Prophet ﷺ was alive, many companions, they memorized the entire Quran. And then the next generation memorized the Quran, then the next generation. So even if the writing was wrong, people started inserting things within the writing or deleting things, it doesn't matter because the Quran was preserved through memory. And number 2, the Quran was also written down. In the lifetime of the Prophet ﷺ, the entire Quran was not compiled in a book form. So what happened was when the revelation would come down, the Prophet ﷺ would tell whoever was there, and he'd call a scribe and tell the scribe to write it down. And the scribe would write it, then he'd read it back to the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to make sure there's no mistakes. And then, so whoever was there, they'd have personal copies of bits and bobs of the Quran. So some surahs, some chapters, some verses. So it's actually never compiled in a complete book form while the Prophet ﷺ was alive. But who compiled it? When was it compiled? Anyone know?
I was after he died, and
Well, if it was never compiled during his lifetime, it has to be after he passed away, isn't it?
what was the
Omar?
Okay, the first time it was actually compiled was about a year after the Prophet passed away, during the reign or leadership of Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu. Because when the Prophet passed away, he was the first Khalifa, wasn't it? He was the successor of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So after about a year, then Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu compiled the Quran. But then it wasn't like in a book form as we know it today, because when the Quran was written down, it was written down on leaves, not stones, like bones and whatever the scribe can get their hands on at that particular moment. So that's what the Quran's written down on. So what Abu Bakr did, he just gathered all these bits and bobs together so that at least the entire Quran is in one place. Yeah, but he wasn't like in a book with pages, fully papered and everything. But then what happened later, it was compiled again, and then it was written in book form. Who compiled it? Everyone? Abu Bakr done it the first time. So I'm saying, who done it the second time? It wasn't Umar, no.
Uthman?
It was Uthman. Yeah. So first Abu Bakr, he ruled the Islamic world for about two and a half years, just under 2.5 years. And then he passed away. Then he was Umar. Umar ruled for how many years, everyone? 10 years. Good. He ruled for 10 years, then he passed away. And there was Uthman. He ruled for 12 years. So within Uthman's reign, he realized that we need to compile the Quran. So what he done was he gathered, so again, he started the process again. So he gathered all the bits and bobs of the Quran, whatever everyone had, and he verified through the people's memorization to make sure that everything was absolutely correct. And then he had the entire Quran written down, and he had copies made, and he distributed the copies to different parts of the world. So Abu Bakr and Uthman. And then obviously we had memorizers, like we mentioned. So main memorizers in every generation. So that was the main source of preservation, were the people memorizing the Quran. That's why Hafiz, like Umar pointed out, Hafiz actually means protector. When a person memorizes the Quran, they are protecting the Quran. Okay, so that's number one. So Allah's promise is still true, that the Quran has never been changed. Number two is predictions in the Quran. Another reason, like some of you mentioned as well, and we're going to go into specifics of this a bit later. So in number two, it says predictions in the Quran. So just for now, just write defeat of Persians. So just writing some examples. I'll explain them briefly and we'll cover them in a bit more detail after as well, when it comes to the prophet part. So defeat of Persians, write Surah Lahab. Defeat of Persians, Surah Lahab. There's a person called Walid ibn Mughira. He's quite significant. Walid ibn Mughira. Just spell it however you want for now. Spelling is not so important. So Mughira. Ghain is a GH. Mughira. You can just write 3 examples. If you can see the screen, you can write more examples. Okay. So one thing that indicates why the Quran is true, because of the predictions that he makes. And the reason why the predictions are so powerful is because, let's say the Quran predicts something. Yeah, the Quran says this is going to happen and it doesn't happen. What is everyone automatically going to conclude about the Quran?
Quran is fake.
Yes, it's not from Allah, because how can Allah get the future wrong? If the Quran is in reality from Allah, Allah should know the future. Allah would know the future. And if he doesn't, then that means it's actually not from Allah, it's made up. That's why the Quran, the predictions are very, very important. And when you look into the Quran, the predictions are made, even by the Prophet Muhammad, we will see that all the predictions have come true. So let's look at the defeat of Persians. So we're going to look into this a bit more. And I'll explain it in detail over there. Yeah.
What does this word do?
Which word? Prophecies. Prophecies is when you predict something that will happen in the future. So you say like 100 years from now, this will happen. This is like a prophecy when you're predicting stuff. Okay, so defeat of Persians. Actually, let's leave that one till later, because there's actually a slide on this that's coming. But let's say Surah Lahab. What's Surah Lahab about?
Abu Lahab and his wife.
Good, Abu Lahab and his wife. Is Allah saying good stuff about them?
No.
So what's Allah saying? That they will go wherever?
Will be cancelled.
They'll go to hell and
Okay, good. So,
like
okay, no, that's fine. Thanks. Okay, so Surah Abu Lahab was one of the leaders of the Quraysh, wasn't it? Yeah?
Yeah.
Abu Lahab was one of the leaders. Was he the only leader of the Quraysh? Or were there many that were completely hostile and they used to abuse the Prophet ﷺ? They, so Abu Lahab was just one of many leaders who hated Islam, who hated the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and they made their life's mission to destroy Islam and make the Prophet ﷺ's life difficult. Yeah. So Abu Lahab was just one of many leaders. Are there surahs about every one of these leaders saying that they're going to go to Jahannam?
No.
No. Out of them, there's only Abu Lahab. And Walid ibn Mughira, he's one of the leaders of Quraysh as well. Yeah. So both of them are significant here. So Allah picks out two of them, Abu Lahab and Walid ibn Mughira, and says that how Allah will punish them and they will go to Jahannam. What does that prove for us? For us?
They're the most significant.
Possibly. Or even Abu Jahl probably even more significant than them. But what else can we prove from this? Yeah.
Is it that they're related to the Prophet?
Not quite. Well, Abu Lahab is, but that's not what we're trying to prove here.
Wait, can you repeat the question?
Why is this so significant? Why have we actually even brought it up here? Anyone? Okay. What did Abu Lahab have to do to prove that Islam is wrong?
Become a Muslim.
Become a Muslim. Imagine if he became a Muslim before he passed away, would he still go to hell?
No.
No. So imagine, and this surah, this was revealed right in the beginning of Islam, isn't it? If you remember when the Prophet stood up on the Mount Safa and he made announcements, it wasn't even right at the end of his life. It was right at the beginning of the Prophet's prophethood, isn't it? And right in the beginning, Allah told all the believers, Abu Lahab will go to the hellfire. Everyone got that?
Mm-hmm.
Now, to prove the Quran wrong, all that had to be done is that imagine Abu Lahab became a Muslim at the end of his life. What did everyone say about the surah? That it's wrong and Allah didn't know the future. So hence, is this Quran from Allah?
No.
No. Likewise, Allah did the same thing with Walid ibn Mughira as well. Allah said how Allah will grip him and Allah will punish him. So again, the same thing. So for us, it shows us how the person who revealed the Quran definitely knows the future. Does that make sense, everyone? Everyone to this point? Okay, and likewise in Battle of Badr, basically, we've studied the Battle of Badr. We know how difficult it was, wasn't it? How many Muslims were there?
313.
Yeah, 313. Who said 1,000?
You said it.
Yeah, so 330 Muslims against how many Quraysh? 1,000. And the Muslims were ill-equipped, didn't have much weapons, armor, horses. Yeah, they hardly had much. So seemingly, outwardly, it seemed like the Muslims are going to lose. But Allah told the believers in the Quran that the enemies will lose and they will run away before the battle even started. So again, Allah predicted the outcome of the Battle of Badr. And the Quran predicted that the body of Pharaoh will always remain preserved. And that's why today it's still in the museum and still has the body of Pharaoh. Okay, so these are some predictions in the Quran indicate that this must be from Allah. Everyone understood that? Any questions on this before we move forward? Okay, number 3, linguistic miracle or challenge. What does the word linguistic refer to?
Like grammar.
Language, yeah. So the Quran, the language of the Quran is a miracle in itself. We're not going to go into detail what makes a miracle, except too much detail. Here, the purpose of this is just to keep it brief, so we know the outline of things. So the Quran in itself is a linguistic miracle. Allah gave 4 challenges to the Arabs. Now you should write this down, yeah? So Allah challenged the Arabs 4 times in the Quran to produce something similar to the Quran. Allah challenged the Arabs 4 times in the Quran to produce something similar to the Quran, but none was able to do so. Yes, Allah challenged the Arabs 4 times to produce something similar to the Quran, but no one was able to do so. And it's on the screen as well, whoever can see. So Allah challenged the Arabs 4 times to produce something similar to the Quran, but none was able to do so. So when the Quran was written down, in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, that was the time where the Arabic language was at its peak. What I mean by that is the language itself, that was the time where it was the most eloquent, because the languages, they go through phases. Let's say, for example, the English language. When was the English language at its best? Anyone know?
Shakespeare.
Yeah, Shakespeare. That's why the Shakespeare's language was so poetic, was so eloquent. We still study it today, even though it's it was written such a long time ago. So that's when the English language would have to speak. Nowadays, the English language has deteriorated a lot. If you look at how normal people speak, it's very different how it was before. Yeah. So right now we are nowhere near as eloquent as in the English language as we were in the time of Shakespeare. Yeah. So like in the Arabic language, the peak of its eloquence was at the time of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. That's when everyone was competing in poetry, saying the most eloquent lines, who can, so that's what it was all about. That's why the greatest miracle of the Quran is the language. Allah revealed such a book that no poet of the time was able to compete with in terms of how eloquent it was and how poetic it was. And the first challenge Allah gave to the Arabs was produce. And by the way, what you're expected to write is just very brief. So I've said what you expect to write. But if you want to write any more detail, then that's up to you. So if you want to write anything extra, so you remember anything like that, then that's up to you. Okay. So Allah challenged the Arabs. The first challenge was to produce a Quran similar to our Quran. So produce an entire Quran similar. And obviously no one was able to do so. Then Allah lowered the challenge. Allah said, then produce 1 surah. Yeah. Allah said, produce 1 surah similar to that of the Quran. And none was able to do so. The next challenge was to produce 10 verses. Then none was able to do so. And the last verse was just to write 1 verse which can match any verse of the Quran in terms of its eloquence and poetic nature. And no one was able to do so till today. So no one has been able to fulfill this challenge. So this is another indication why I believe the Quran must be from Allah. And that's why many of the poets in the time of the Prophet ﷺ actually became Muslims. Because the poets, they knew poetry. They knew how to make things eloquent. They knew all the poetic techniques and everything. But when they read the Quran, they realized that the level of this language cannot be done by a human being. That's why many poets in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, because they were masters of poetry, they actually became Muslims because they knew that no human could have done this. So this is number 3. It's called linguistic miracle. So the miracle in terms of this language. Okay, number 4 is allusion to scientific facts. So allusion just means indicates towards scientific facts. One thing we have to understand is did Allah reveal the Quran to teach us science? No. So this is not supposed to be a science book. It's not supposed to be a book of biology or a book of physics. That's not the purpose. The purpose of the Quran is to what? Is to guide us, isn't it? Is to teach us how to live our lives. Do we need to know science and physics to be able to live our lives and be guided? No. That's why this is not a book of science. But so the reason why this is also part of this is just to show you, let's take other school, let's take the Bible. If the God that wrote the Bible is explaining how the earth is flat, would you take it seriously that this is actually from God? No, because if God had in reality written it, he would know what the earth looks like, isn't it? It's not that God didn't know what it looked, that's why he's describing as flat. That's why. So the miracle of the Quran here is that the Quran is worded in such a way that actually doesn't contradict science. So there's no, the Quran doesn't say that the earth is flat, or there's no scientific inconsistency that it's wrong. This is clearly wrong according to science, and the Quran says a different way. Yeah, there's nothing like that. But in reality, it's actually the opposite. There are many statements in the Quran which indicates towards scientific facts that were only discovered 100 years ago, 200 years ago through telescopes or scientific equipment. So basically, the Quran contains many facts, scientific facts, which were not known at that time. So these things were not known 1,400 years ago, but the Quran has these statements in it. So when the Prophet Muhammad recited these to the Sahaba, they wouldn't have known what he meant because they didn't have that level of scientific knowledge then. But now, because of our scientific advancement, we, looking back at the Quran, we're like, hey, this makes perfect sense. So let's look at some examples. You can write these examples down. So number 1, Allah talks about the origin of the universe. So you can just write origin of the universe. So you don't have to write them in, you just write example, just list, so you're able to list a few examples of scientific facts. Number 1, Allah talks about the origin of the universe. Allah says how the skies and the earths, they were all just one particle, you can say. And then how Allah split them and then it expanded and became a universe. Yeah, which kind of sounds similar to which narrative? To what? The Big Bang, isn't it? Yeah, we're not going to say this is exactly referring to the Big Bang because we don't know if the Big Bang is correct or not. There could be, and there's so many differences in the Big Bang. But all we're trying to say is Allah talks about the origin of the universe, and it sounds quite similar to what the scientists are saying today. Number 2, Allah talks about the expansion of the universe. So Allah says in one verse, "Indeed, we created it, and we are always expanding it." Now, 1,400 years ago, why did Allah randomly tell the Arabs who had no knowledge of science that we are always expanding the universe? They wouldn't have understood what that means. And could someone just be guessing all this and just happen to get all this stuff right? No. So the person that's actually talking in the Quran seems like that person knows a good deal about the world and how it works and how it was formed. Yeah, because this was actually discovered only about 100 or so years ago. There's a scientist, he discovered that the world is actually expanding. Because, let's say you take a balloon that's not inflated and you put loads of dots in it. And then when you blow the balloon, put air in it, what's going to happen to these dots? They're going to spread out, isn't it? And the scientists discovered that's actually what's happening to all the stars and everything around in the universe. It's actually constantly spreading out proportionally. So then this verse of the Quran makes perfect sense. So before the scientists discovered this, people will be like, no, what does Allah mean by that? We don't know. But now that the scientists discovered this, now it makes perfect sense. So the expansion of the universe, Allah talks about the embryo. Just write this as an example. How a baby is formed, all the different stages that it goes through for a baby to be formed. Allah describes this in a lot of detail. And another one Allah talks about is female bees. Just write these as lists. So Allah talks about the female bees. And why this is so significant, if you just type in YouTube as well, if you go home, go on YouTube, type in female bees Quran, there's so many videos on this. So why this is significant is because generally, so basically, obviously you have a beehive and you have loads of bees. There's certain type of bees, what they do, they go out of the beehive, they look for flower, and once they find flower, they come back to the beehive and report what they found basically. And generally, because these are like the worker bees, and generally the worker bees that go out in the field, generally who's it done by, men or women? Yeah, it's done by males, isn't it? So generally this was presumed that these are the male bees that are doing all this stuff. So there's no like scientific equipment to go and check and find out if it's female or male bees, yeah? So generally it's presumed that these are done by male bees. But the Quran specifically makes a point to highlight that this is done by the female bees. So uses the female pronouns, that the female bees, they go out and they find their path towards the flower and so on and so on. And they come back, yeah, and they report to the queen bee, yeah, to the female bee. So obviously, again, so going back 1,000 years ago, the companions listening to this, they wouldn't think twice about it. Oh, okay, Allah's mentioned it. Okay, let's move forward. But now, after scientific discovery, we actually find out this is actually the female bee that does this. It's the job of the female bee to go out to, so the female bees, they are the worker bees, not the male bees. So again, this is another indication. How did the Quran know this? Okay, and the Quran also mentions how the moon reflects the light. Before it was understood that the moon has its own light, but the Quran said it, 1,000 years ago, that the moon reflects the light and so on. It talks about how the water is origin of life. Today we've discovered that, obviously living things are made of cells, and about 70-80% of a cell is made out of water. So we are primarily made out of water, which is the origin of life, water. Are we paying attention? And the Quran talks about how the sky is a protection. So anyone know what this is talking about? How is the sky a protection?
It talks about like there's different types of like rays from the
Good. Yeah. So when Allah says the sky is a protection, if that was said 1,000 years ago, would everyone know what this is talking about? All the scientific rays and from the, what is it called, the ozone layer or something? I'm not a scientist, but all these different rays that come in from above. Yeah. So 1,000 years ago, people wouldn't have known what it's on about. But now, because we have scientific advancement, we know that what the Quran is referring to now. So how did the Quran just guess all these things? Yeah, so it makes it highly improbable to think that a person could have just guessed all these things. And the second point I'm going to make is, if let's just presume, the Prophet Muhammad just guessed all these things. If he was guessing scientific stuff, what would have definitely happened? What would have definitely happened?
He would have made mistakes.
He would have made mistakes. No one guesses a load of random scientific stuff and they happen to be 100% correct every single time. There would have been many mistakes. So it's highly improbable where, if let's say you mention the scientific discoveries to someone or facts, and they say, no, you probably just guessed it. Is that very likely or possible that someone could have just guessed all these things and got them all right? No, it's very improbable. Yeah. So this is why this is, for us, it's a good indication why the Quran is from Allah. Everyone got that? Yeah. Okay. So next one is the effect. So it's just the way its recitation changes people. So it's the way. So what I mean by this is the way the recitation can change people. So many people. So write this down. So many people just listen to the Quran and they actually become Muslims. So many people, just by listening to the Quran, even though they don't understand it, they become Muslims. So the way the recitation changes people. Some people, they even through the translation. So many people, they just pick up the Quran, they read one line or a few lines of the Quran, and it affects them so much that they become Muslims. So it's a very, very powerful book. So again, this isn't like solid proof because it changes people, hence this is from Allah. No, this isn't like solid proof, but for us, it's just another indicator why this Quran is a special book, is actually, it's a divine source. Okay, number 6, easy to learn and memorize. So yeah.
What does this word mean?
I'll explain it when we come to it. We haven't explained it yet. So on your sheet, it says number 6, no contradictions. So just skip that for now and do easy to learn. So what I mean by easy to learn is obviously we discussed it before. Millions of Muslims have memorized it in every generation. So millions of Muslims in number 7 in your sheet. Millions of Muslims have memorized it in every generation. So it's a book that's every single word of it is memorized. Generally, we don't have this for any other book in the world, as far as I know, where millions and millions and millions of people in every generation are memorizing every single word of it. And it's very easy to memorize. An average person takes them about 3 years when they go to a madrasa to memorize the Quran. So generally, on average, it takes about 3 years. But some people do it in 2, some people do it in 1. I know many people have done it in 40 days or 3 months, memorize the entire Quran. Okay, and lastly, number 7, in your sheet's number 6, it says there are no contradictions in it. How many years did it take for the entire Quran to be revealed? Everyone?
20, 23? No. 23? Oh.
21.
Okay,
I think it's 23.
10.
Because he got when he was 40 and then he died like at the age of 63.
Oh, 7.
okay, at what age did the Prophet become prophet? 40.
Yeah, 40.
Which age did he pass away?
63.
63. So good, Muhiz was correct. Yeah, so he became prophet at age of 40, passed away 63. That's around 23 years. Yeah, to be specific, probably 22 years and about 7 months or 8 months probably, or something like that. But we'll just say 23 years. Yeah, so 23 years. Now the Quran, the Prophet ﷺ did not go to his house and he was making first draft 1, draft 2, draft 3. Everyone looking this way. So draft 4, then he perfects it.
Do you have any more little blue books with the plain paper?
Is it here?
Oh, wow.
Okay, so he didn't make many different drafts of the book and so on. And then when his final copy is ready, he distributed it to the people. And no, it didn't work like that. The Quran a lot of it was actually spontaneous speech. It was someone would come to the Prophet ﷺ, ask him a question, and straight away, immediately, Quran verse would be revealed, informing the people of the answer. Sometimes be in battle, while he's fighting, Quran verse is being revealed. Okay, so the Prophet, a lot of the Quran, a good portion of the Quran, or either half or majority, I'm not sure, but a lot of it was actually just on the spot, revelation coming down, him informing the people. Okay, the first thing. So when you're just making up speech on the spot, generally when you're talking, a lot of imperfection in your speech, isn't it? Sometimes it doesn't make sense. Sometimes the grammar is off. Sometimes when you've said something, you're like, I could have explained that better. So you go back and you reword it, isn't it? So even when I'm teaching you guys, I'll say something, I'm like, I should have said it this way, and I'll say it again. Or I'll make a slight mistake in my wording, then I'll reword it. But in the Quran, is anything like that? If you actually read the Quran from back to front, there's a constant theme. There's a tone. There's a tune there. There's melody. There's rhyming. There's quoting technique. There's eloquence, and it's consistent throughout the entire Quran. If the Prophet was just making stuff up, there'd be a lot of inconsistencies. Everyone got that? Yeah. And number 2 is, let's say, as atheists or non-Muslims, they say the Prophet was just making this up and he was lying. If he was lying, so imagine he was saying this for 23 years. If he was lying and making stuff up for 23 years, wouldn't there be loads of contradictions in it? So first he says one thing, and then 10 years later he forgot that he said this, and he says a complete opposite thing. So let's say even when people, when they make excuses, let's say you make excuse to your parents or to your friends, and generally to keep up a lie, it's quite hard because you need to remember what you said 2 weeks ago. Because imagine you said one reason 2 weeks ago, and today you need to make sure you say that same reason, isn't it? Because imagine if you use a different excuse, then you've been caught out that you've been lying. So you have to make sure your story stays the same, nothing changes. So imagine trying to keep up a lie for 23 years. That'd be quite difficult, isn't it? And you're bound to make so many mistakes. So the fact that the Quran has no contradictions. So you should write. Has everyone written this down? Okay. So write down that it's revealed over 23 years. So revealed over 23 years. So on point number 6, everyone. We're in point number 6 on your sheets. So revealed over 23 years. If it wasn't from Allah, there would have been many contradictions in it. Contradiction means when you say one thing and you say another thing and they don't make sense. It goes against each other. So you revealed the 23 years. If it wasn't from Allah, there would have been many contradictions in it. Okay, so once you're done, your next task is, I just want you to, I'm going to give you about a minute just to read over what you've written. Then I want you to try and explain to the person next to you. So in full sentences, why you believe the Quran. So you can use your notes to help you. If you don't have, if you can do without your notes, even better. But if you need to use your notes to help you, yeah, you can do. Yeah. So just going through with the person next to you, why you believe that the Quran is from Allah. Any questions about anything I've done as well? Any questions? Okay, let me just pause this. Okay, so that's just to help you remember a few of the things that we discussed, so you don't go home and just forget everything. But very quickly. Okay, so we mentioned 7 reasons why we believe that the Quran is from Allah. Okay, so without using your sheets, so let's say I'm going to ask you a few. Let's say Mustafa. Okay, so tell me about their preservation without you looking at your sheets. Close your eyes. You're constantly looking at your sheet. Close your eyes, or look ahead. Yeah. So tell me about the preservation. What did we learn about that? You have no idea what we talked about?
I'm getting confused with the other one.
Okay, what's up with that? Ariane, can you help him?
So Allah promised to preserve the Quran. We know he's even from like over 1400 years ago. He's preserved it because each generation there are like millions of people who have memorized it. So we know that all the words are the same.
Okay, good. Do you know any more details that we mentioned? You don't have to, but if you do.
No.
Okay, going back to Mustafa. Anything else to add?
So basically, from like the Prophet Muhammad, like all the generations carried on the people that memorized in like the Quran.
Okay, he said that. He said about memorizers. What else?
Like the Hafiz, like the knowledge, like people that made sure that even if it's like people like.
One second, what's up here there? So Arian's mentioned the point that in every generation people have memorized it. What else can you tell me about the preservation of the Quran in terms of its history that we discussed? Alif? When was it preserved? When was it written down? These sort of things.
So basically, at the beginning, like obviously it wasn't like written down in a book. It was just written down on like leaves and stones and stuff like that. And then when Abu Bakr became the Khalifa, he put them all together so they wouldn't get lost and stuff like that unless they was killed.
Good.
And then when Uthman became the Khalifa, he decided to make it into a book.
Okay, good. I'm gonna stop you there. Okay, good. So and then it distributed different copies of it. Okay, tell me some things to tafsir. Without looking at your sheets, tell me some things to the predictions in the Quran. Anything you remember?
Yeah. In Surah Lahab, the Quran talks about how Abu Lahab will go to the hellfire, and this was this surah was shown before he died. So to prove that his surah was wrong, he could have just become a Muslim, so he wouldn't go to the hellfire, to prove that they were wrong.
Good. Okay, and then we had other prophecy at Defeat of Persia, Walid bin Mughira, Battle Badr, and so on and so on. Okay, Irfan, tell me about, without looking at your sheets, tell me about the linguistic miracle without looking at your sheet.
Allah challenged the Arabs 4 times, but they couldn't compete at the level of language used.
Perfect. Good. Okay, Omer, can you tell me just very briefly, just 1 or 2 sentences about scientific miracles in the Quran? Or give me a few examples.
Well, the the Quran talks about how like the moon isn't actually like giving off its own light, and we only realized that like during the past like century or millennia, and they got told that back like 1600 years ago.
1400.
1400.
Yeah. Okay. Any other? Just to mention a few quick examples. What other examples are there of scientific miracles?
The expansion of like the universe.
Good. What else?
The waves being sort of like the moon being part of like the waves and
The moon being part of the
the
waves.
moon sort of it's not controlling it's the I don't know how to explain it.
Sky.
It's something to do with the waves and the moon. Yeah.
Ozone.
Okay, we'll stop you there. Can anyone else fill in? Riz?
Female bees.
Okay, let's talk about the female bees, how they're doing the work. Anything else, anyone?
The expansion.
Expansion of?
Universe.
Expansion of the universe. Okay, good. I'll stop you there. Okay, so there's quite a few examples. And what can we say about no contradictions? Muhammad? What's that referring to? Without you looking at sheet?
Oh yeah, so like, it could have been written by like a prophet because it was revealed over 23 years, and you wouldn't really be able to keep alive for 23 years without missing it.
Okay, so one thing, everyone else pay attention, Alif, pay attention, please. So number one is that to keep up a lie would be quite difficult for 20 years. What else would be different? What else did I mention about not?
If Allah, if it wasn't from Allah, then there will be contradictions.
Okay, there will be contradictions. What else did I mention? Anyone else? Did anyone else write anything for that?
Wait. Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
So if it was anyone other than Allah, then they wouldn't be able to guess like everything. Like, let's say you can't just magically guess like, you know, oh yeah, you're gonna win that battle. Like, obviously you could say you're gonna win.
Okay, I'm gonna stop you there because these are different points. They're like prophecies you're mentioning here. Yeah, I'm talking about under no contradiction. Okay, what if you haven't written this? So another thing I want you to write under no contradiction is that, okay, so number one, you said if from someone other than Allah, then there'd be contradictions because we revealed over 23 years. Another thing is there'd be inconsistencies in the language. I mentioned, isn't it? Yeah. The language would be, everyone write it down. The language would be inconsistent.
Where?
In no contradiction. Number 6. Just make your point wherever you can fit in. So the language would be inconsistent. I mentioned, isn't it? Because no one speaks the same all the time in every situation with still all these poetic techniques, isn't it? Yeah.
How do you spell that? That's what you said.
Consistent. So SIS, tent. Okay. So the language will be inconsistent. You write an inconsistent.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so that's that. So tomorrow we're going to discuss, inshallah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad, why he must have been in reality a prophet of God. Okay, so I'm going to, any questions about anything anyone want to ask? So from the other class as well. So I'm going to pause the recording. So then if you guys want to ask anything, I'm going to stop the recording.